Our Palm Sunday story comes from the Gospel of Luke. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he had come near to Bethphage and Bethany, at the place called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it.'" So those who were sent departed and found it as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They said, "The Lord needs it." Then they brought it to Jesus, and after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. As he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. And as he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." The Gospel of the Lord.
I'd like us to imagine that we're in Jerusalem and we're part of this crowd that's assembling, okay? And I want us to think about, what do we see? What do we hear? What are we feeling in right here in our gut? To give a little perspective, what was happening in Jerusalem that week, this is the week of the Passover, a big celebration for the Jewish people. And remember that they are living in a country that is occupied by the Romans, right? And so these are oppressed people living in occupied territory. And every year at the time of the Passover, the occupiers wanted to make sure that the Jewish people knew who was mighty. And so at the same time that Jesus is getting ready to enter into Jerusalem, the government official is coming in on one end of the town with war horses and chariots. And he has compelled a crowd of people to assemble and is making them cheer. And you imagine how that would feel if we were occupied and there was somebody who was coming in when we wanted to celebrate Easter. Okay? Then on the other end of town comes Jesus, riding on a donkey. And crowds of people are assembling. These are people who have been following him, people who have heard about all the things that he has done, right? And they have these high expectations that Jesus is the one who is going to save them from this occupier. Imagine you're in that crowd. How are you feeling? All this, you know what's happening on the other end of town, and you know what's happening on this end of town, and yet Jesus comes and you are shouting. Let's do that together. Look at the last line, verse 38 in your bulletin, where it says, "Blessed is the King." Let's yell it out. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." And then you know what happens right after that? The religious leaders tell Jesus, "You tell your followers to be quiet." You understand why? All the tension in town. And what does Jesus say? He says, "I tell you, if these were silent, what? The very stones would cry out." Jesus has decided he is going to enter into the mess. In us thinking about this Holy Week and Jesus and what he does during this Holy Week, during this time where we've had heavy weeks. I have to share that when we were waking up to the news that Philandro Castile was killed, I was on vacation, and And I was really missing being part of Christian community. I felt really kind of alone, and I was just pacing in my house. I was just making laps around my couch. And I'm going, again, Lord? Is this happening again in the Twin Cities after Jamar Clark? What's going on, Lord? And then my phone rang, and it was one of my colleagues from Chicago. She works at the ELCA in Chicago. Her name is Judith Roberts. She's an African-American woman. And she said, Deb, we were in this meeting with Presiding Bishop Eaton and all of the top leaders of the ELCA, and we were talking about something else, and she said, but I couldn't stay in that room. She said, I had to call the Twin Cities and see, how are you? And then this African-American woman prayed for me. She has a 22-year-old son. And then she said, well, we were in this meeting talking about something else, but we have decided that we want to come to the Twin Cities. We want to be with you. And it's just like Jesus, right? Deciding to enter into the mess on Palm Sunday.